A couple years ago, a close friend, Ashley, started a long-distance relationship with a guy, Chris. He has been really good to her, and after meeting in person a few times, they decided to move in together. I was super happy for her as she had a few bad relationships over the years and it was nice to see her in a healthy one. That joy faded the last couple months before she moved a few states over to be with him. The issue isn't her moving, but that she repeatedly joked about having a baby from Chris. At first, I accepted it as jokes, but over time I realized Ashley was serious. For context, Ashley has 2 children from a previous relationship, ages 10 and 12. Chris absolutely doesn't want kids. He told her this at the start, and any time she hinted possibly wanting more, he shot it down, saying it was a deal breaker. Now, Chris is more than willing to accept her children as her own, because he loves her, and after meeting her kids, them as well. He's accepted that they are a package deal with her, and since they are at an age where they are semi-independent, it's not an issue for him. To me, Chris is a real bro for taking on her kids without issue. Hearing Ashley say she wants a baby out of him, one way or another, bothered me to no end. It's hard enough to find a partner that treats you well and accepts children that aren't their own. To find one that does and then talk about plotting to force a baby seems gross and manipulative. Before her move, I had sat down with Ashley, trying to talk sense into her. At first she resisted, but finally it seemed she understood how shitty it would be. After I felt like she had understood, I put the issue behind me and helped support her through the hassle of moving. A few days after she left, I got a call from a mutual friend who delves into the Wiccan / metaphysical realm. She was distraught and confessed to me that shortly before Ashley's move, Ashley had come to her asking for a fertility spell. This friend didn't feel comfortable about it and refused. When pushed, she said she cast a spell for a healthy and honest relationship, but told Ashley it was for fertility. As you can imagine, I was livid. I messaged Ashley, confronting her about what I learned, and she laughed it off as she was desperate, but magic is fake anyway. So what's the harm? She then let it slip that since Chris was planning on getting a vasectomy in a few months, she had poked holes in their condoms as a last-ditch effort. At that point, I couldn't stay silent. I gathered up screenshots of all the conversations over the last few months and sent them to Chris. He understandably freaked out and kicked her out. Now, Ashley hates me because she was kicked out after a huge move and didn't have a job or money to make it back. She said I'm a terrible person for putting her and her kids out on the street. My son Simon, he is 16, moved out of the room he used to share with his little brother and got his own room a few months back. Ever since, he's been complaining about his mom barging in without knocking and interrupting his sleep and studying. Sometimes when he's changing, I know that she's his mother, but he says he's got his own room and has a job and is learning to become an independent adult, but doesn't feel like his privacy is being respected even when that's his mom. He says he's not a kid anymore and is entitled to at least get a knock on the door before she comes in. He was getting tired of her not listening to him, so he came to me and said, "Dad, you need to help me set some clear boundaries with Mom." So I spoke to her about her need to knock before entering Simon's room. She was like, "What? And no, we're family, not strangers. Do you really expect me to foolishly knock on the door 5 times a day? That's ridiculous. Also, the knocks doors in their own home?" I told her my family, for instance. She made a face, then went on a rant about how my family hate each other's and the way they treat each other's like they were strangers is shameful. I told her family or strangers, it's about respecting one's privacy. We had an argument about it, and I told her if she wasn't going to stop with the barging and refuse to knock on the door before entering, then our son will get a lock. She did it again at 11 p.m. She barged in when our son was asleep. He jumped up because he got scared. Once he told me this, I told him to go ahead and get a lock and pay for it with his own money. There was literally no other way. My wife saw it and got upset, and my brother was visiting when she was raising her voice at me if I really went ahead and got a lock for Simon despite her disapproval, and said that I caught her off guard and it's not okay. Because this teaches our children that they can manipulate one parent into doing what they want. I told her that Simon got the lock, not me, and I already warned her about the possibility of him getting a lock because he was getting tired of her boundary crossing. So she should have expected this outcome. She mentioned the same above points in her defense and said locks mean secrets, and that's not good. My brother was sitting watching while she was complaining. She began chewing him out when he asked her to let Simon keep the lock and said it wasn't a big deal. She stopped talking to me and Simon till we removed the lock, but I've no intentions on doing that. 6 years ago my son Matthew had a daughter with his now ex-wife Josie. I have always thought of Josie as my own daughter, so when they divorced 7 years ago due to my son cheating, I was conflicted and disappointed. Josie wasn't particularly close with any of her family, so my husband and I naturally took them in. Josie was an angel. She had insisted that we didn't have to lift a finger more than before we had taken them in, and though she was hurt, she kept civil around Matthew. My husband and I held a huge hand in raising their daughter Ruth, because Matthew remarried less than a year later and now has a 4-year-old son after disowning Ruth. 2 years ago my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was hard on everyone, especially Ruth. They were extremely close. She told him about her girlfriends and boyfriends before anyone else and has always wanted him to be the one to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Matt rarely ever visited and didn't answer our calls, often saying that we had other kids, so it wasn't like my husband was dying lonely. Last night Matt stopped by to talk about inheritance. He never mentioned Josie nor Ruth and hinted that he thought he should get more inheritance than his siblings the entire time. My husband and I shared awkward looks until he decided to cut in. He explained that everyone would get a piece, but he'd focus more on Ruth and Bonnie, one of our other grandkids. Matt got angry and said that Ruth was just a bastard and that his son deserved more than her. My husband got furious after that and left the room saying that he wouldn't include Matthew at all. Matt yelled back and turned to me saying that Ruth wasn't worth it because she'd just grow up to be a whore like her mother. I told him that I'd rather have her mother as my daughter than him as my son and insisted that he leave. I'm getting phone calls from Matt's wife and family friends saying that my husband and I overreacted, and he was just angry that we were playing favorites. To clear some things up, Josie did not cheat on Matthew. Josie and Matthew met later in college and Josie was known as a party girl. Before that, Ruth isn't the product of an affair, but we are planning on getting a DNA test because what Matthew said has gotten under Ruth's skin. She was at the house when this occurred and overheard it. When it came to taking in Josie and Ruth, we didn't hesitate because Josie is not from here. She and Matt lived in another country until he moved them here a few months before he got caught cheating, and they had nowhere else to go as Josie was a stay-at-home mom. I had no intentions of choosing Josie over Matt, then and now, and I never discouraged Matt from visiting. I tried to make it very clear that we weren't picking and choosing when we took Josie in. We just wanted her and our granddaughter to be safe and have a good home. I am a 17-year-old female, and I still live with my mom, my stepdad, and my 2 half-siblings, 5 and 7 year. My dad died when I was 5, driving me to the hospital. Mom didn't want to pay for an ambulance. He died in the crash and my leg and spine got busted up in a way that has left me needing a cane pretty much ever since. My stepdad's always been a little distant with me. He likes to make jokes about how I'm an early blooming black widow. I think he gets that from my mom, who blames me for my dad's death. I do too, it is my fault after all, so I don't push back on it. Anyway, the point is that with the current situation my parents are always looking for ways to get my half-siblings active and doing things without leaving the house, and have recently settled on scavenger hunts. I have no problem with this, honestly. I wish they'd stop hiding stuff in my underwear drawer, but it's a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, so that's not the worst. My problem though is that they keep taking my cane when I'm not looking. I tend to get lost in my homework and my writing hobby and zone out, and having it be one of the items that my half-siblings have to find. When I complain to my stepdad, he's a SAHD, so is usually the one running these things. He scolds me for being selfish and points out that my swivel chair has wheels if I need the bathroom and that they always get it to me before I have to go downstairs for dinner. I tried my mom yesterday, and she said that I was being a brat and that if I wanted a father who cared about me I shouldn't have killed my dad. I got really upset at that point and called my grandparents, my mom's parents. Dads are dead too. They showed up at 10 p.m. yesterday, and Grandma screamed at them while Grandpa packed my stuff up and helped me out to their car. My mom's been blowing up my phone and email, calling me all sorts of names and accusing me of turning her family against her and trying to get her in legal trouble, since minors can't move out. And I can't help but think that maybe she's